Chapter 12. Ripples and Aftereffects. The three of us agreed. No one would hear a word about the scriptorium, not even Anne. Usually, keeping something that monumental from her would have been impossible, but she was too preoccupied with far lighter matters to notice our unspoken pact. Anne and Nerida were now officially together, and as I had correctly assumed, Anne's absence on Halloween had been the turning point. Nerida, uncertain about her feelings at first, had needed time, and apparently, dating Gareth had helped her realize what, or rather who, she truly wanted. Poor Gareth. But while Anne basked in newfound happiness, Sebastian spent the first week of November in a sullen daze. Ominous still hadn't fully forgiven him, and their usual easy camaraderie had been replaced by a stiff, silent tension. It didn't help that both of them were treating me like I might shatter at any moment, constantly bickering over who would carry my books, hovering at my side as if I needed a personal entourage. Their concern might have been sweet under normal circumstances, but now it was just exhausting. Sebastian refused to be my partner in defense against the dark arts, too afraid to point a wand in my direction, and Ominous had secretly been completing my transfiguration assignments, believing I wouldn't notice my spiders turn buttons were far too perfectly shaped to be my own work. The piercing headaches and lingering weakness I'd suffered after the Cruciatus curse were gone. Even the ever-finicky Madame Blaney had deemed me perfectly fine. Yet, my two stubborn companions were so fixated on their guilt and rivalry that neither of them would listen to me. If anything, the real disappointment was the books we had risked so much to recover. Instead of lost wisdom, they were nothing more than Salazar Slytherin's private journals, filled with bleak, bitter musings and twisted perceptions of the Muggle world. Still, our ordeal hadn't been entirely in vain. The unanswered questions about his aunt had weighed on Ominous more than he had ever admitted, and now that the burden had finally lifted, he claimed that having closure was a relief. I was only glad that he had not been able to see her remains.
My aunt wanted to change our family's traditions,
Ominous had murmured one evening.
And she will always be my favourite person in the world for that.
Ominous and I gradually returned to our usual routine of watching the lake, both because we enjoyed each other's company and because our group felt incomplete without Sebastian and Anne. Moreover, winter was now lurking behind every corner, the cold settling in our common room and sweeping through our robes. Meeting up in the crypt no longer felt like the warmest activity. The spicy fragrance of Ominous's birthday tea curled in delicate spirals between us as we sat in front of the window, wrapped in blankets and our own thoughts.
Did you notice how Sebastian completely ignored me at breakfast today?
Ominous asked, leaning back in his armchair. He blew on his tea with unnecessary force, brows drawn low, pushing his eyes into the shadows.
He wouldn't even pass me the butter, as if he's the one with the right to hold a grudge.
I hid a smile behind my cup. Of course I had noticed. And I had also noticed that Ominous was far more annoyed by the lack of attention from his best friend than by the actual reason he was upset. He's isolating himself out of remorse, Ominous, I said calmly. He's apologized over and over. You're the one refusing to let this go. Ominous hesitated, clearly debating to argue, but his expression softened. His voice, however, faltered slightly.
I know,
he admitted. His grip tightened around his cup, as though the warmth might help him push out the words, tongue heavy with confession.
But every time I make up my mind to forgive him, I think about...
His gaze drifted toward me.
What he did to you.
I exhaled quietly, watching the way his fingers traced absent patterns along the rim of his cup. His hands had always fascinated me. Graceful, refined, yet steady with an unwavering strength. I was grateful we were sitting in separate chairs, because if we weren't, I wasn't entirely sure I would have resisted the temptation to touch them.
I'm the one who knows what the Cruciatus curse feels like,
Ominous murmured.
Sebastian doesn't. And hearing you scream like that was harder to bear than anything else that happened that day.
Warmth spread through my chest, up to my fingertips, the heat of my cup merging with the resonance of his words. How could I have felt cold only a moment ago? How could I ever feel cold when I was near him? I didn't care anymore if he could sense the way my heart raced. It was his to observe, his to know. Every beat, his responsibility.
It should have been me,
He said finally.
Sebastian should have cast it on me, not you.
The haze of my thoughts cleared in an instant, panic flashing through me at the idea, at the mere thought of hearing his screams. I had already shattered under the weight of his tears. Absolutely not, I said, my voice rising. Sebastian and I convinced you to enter the passage. It had to be me, and I don't regret it.
But
How many times do I have to say this? I'm fine. I let out a small chuckle, nudging his knee with my foot, hoping it would be enough to convince him. He shifted, a forced smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. It was the unbearable strain of remembering that made him drop the topic, his eyes still clouded with guilt as he finished his tea. The unease lingered between us. Yet, I willed myself to focus on the flutter in my stomach, letting it overpower the tightness in my chest.